War is immoral. Poverty is immoral. Racism is immoral. Police brutality is immoral. Oppression is immoral. Genocide is immoral. Imperialism is immoral. This country represents all those things. All those things. All those things. All those things.
Sick of the trolls? Confused by fake news? Afraid of what the fascists might do next? My global warning guest this week is widely recognized as one of the foremost experts on the far right, online and off, and helps organizations, policymakers, and everyday individuals combat digital toxicity and right-wing extremism. Now CEO and founding partner of Inviolable, focused on guiding organizations in building resilience against targeted harassment and hate, Melissa Ryan began this work in 2016 in response to what she saw as platforming of fringe extremist groups by mainstream media. This turned into Control, Alt-Right, Delete, her brilliantly named weekly newsletter with tens of thousands of readers. But that's not all. Our guest is regularly quoted by the likes of the New York Times, Washington Post, NPR, Reuters, and the 19th News. Former President Barack Obama cited her work in his remarks on disinformation. Melissa was actually selected to join the 2023 inaugural cohort of the Obama Foundation USA Leaders Program and still serves as a board chair of Netroots Nation. She has also been a featured speaker at Harvard Kennedy School of Government, the New York Daily News Innovation Lab, and the Solomon R. Guggenheim Museum. Previously, Melissa served as digital strategist for progressive campaigns and causes, raising money, mobilizing activists, driving online conversation, and shaping the media narrative. Before that, like me, she was a local journalist in Connecticut. As she'll demonstrate across our conversation, her extensive and varied background affords her unparalleled insights into the spread of fascism, media complicity, disinformation and online toxicity, far-right extremist networks, and how we organize online. That's what we'll discuss. Melissa, thanks for joining me.
Thank you. That may be the best intro I've ever had. I'm going to try to live up to it, and I may be hiring you as my hype man from now on.
That would be my honor. It's what I do best, believe it or not. Thank you. And every word is true and well-deserved. Before we get into your work and how we combat fascism online and off, let's go back to the beginning with your reflections. In the wake of the Zoran victory in New York, what are you seeing in today's successful organizing that further cements your longtime beliefs about what works and what doesn't? And what, if anything, is new in creating waves?
Sure. Well, I'm excited about Mamdani in New York. I also want to give out a shout out to Katie Wilson, the new mayor here in Seattle. I think it's both a wave of, this combination of fighting back against fascism and economic populism. I mean, I think the fact that affordability and universal childcare were part of both of their platforms. I think they do not just a great job of connecting affordability, but also connecting it to like fascism, and the current administration and the people in power are keeping you from having the life you want. Like, we have this big debate right now. Is it affordability? Is it democracy? And I think what Mamdani in particular has been able to do is say it's both. And it's actually these people keeping you from the basic goods and services that you should have.
That's very smart. Yeah. The oligarchy is something people toss around a lot, but they maybe don't understand that connection between policy, economics at the micro and macro levels and how it affects us. Someone just came out with a new report that the poverty line is not 31,000, but something like 135,000.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think this debate is maddening to me, and I'm not a both sidesism person, but both sides of this debate drives me crazy. The affordability people and the democracy people, and it's like, your job, if you want to create change, is to show the threads and to show the through lines and to tell that story successfully. And the more we have this debate, just the more maddening it makes me. I think that's one of the reasons, like if you read my newsletter, you've probably heard me talk about Tesla takedown so much. And part of the reason is because I think that was such an effective economic campaign that tied to, like, these are the people in power who are making your life worse. And here is how to make this man's life worse, like by hitting his pocketbook. And I don't think I've seen, well, maybe the Target boycotts from Black churches that we've seen this year, but I mean, just the through line of like, these are the people that are making your life worse, and here's how to hit them back.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And you have a background, as I mentioned, in working on progressive campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
Before you see the results, of course, how do you distinguish between a politician or a cause that would truly chip away at our unjust system, or one that merely wants to ride the Democratic wave to personal success?
Sure. I mean, I really don't love that binary. I think one of the biggest problems we have when we look at elections and candidates is we sort of create this star system. We build up these idols and then we get upset when they can't possibly deliver. I think it's really important to think about what is the job that these folks are hired to do. They should be constantly trying to keep that job, not just get promoted. And I think it's also important to think about like nobody is irreplaceable. There have been politicians that I've liked that I've been disappointed by. And I've really become very mercenary about it. Like if you're not delivering, if you're not doing the right thing, you've got to go. And maybe you came in with good intentions, and maybe for whatever reason. At the same time, I try to show some grace. I actually, I worked for Democratic senators for many years, raising money and mobilizing for them. I would say some have disappointed me, some have not. But, I think it's important to look at the context of the job. And they need to hear from us constantly. And a lot of times when I see that senators in particular seem out of touch, I'm like, I wonder what they're hearing from their constituents. And I wonder who's coming to their town halls when they have them. I wonder who's coming, to their fundraisers to grump at them. It's really on us as citizens to constantly demand from politicians we like and politicians we don't, that they actually serve us and they do right by us.
I love that. It's so important, and something that a lot of people who may consider themselves on the left, so to speak, but I would classify, if I had to, as more liberal or neoliberal, are offended if you want to hold people you've elected accountable. And I think it's not out of some kind of malice. It's out of fear that if you point out any imperfections in a Democrat, then they'll be replaced by a Republican.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's necessarily true. And from what you've said, I sense that you also have experienced this, that you can have multiple Democrats running and one can be far more true to the people than another. So just to clarify for anyone wondering, are you blue no matter who? Do you know what that means? Have you heard it a lot? And assuming you do, why or why not?
Sure. It's an interesting question. I don't know that I'm blue no matter who. I would say that most of the time I am going to vote for the Democrat. I am a big believer in primaries. I'm a big fan of primaries because I think that's how you get the best candidate for the best nominee for your party that's close to the constituents. So I would say most of the time, if they have won the primary, and shown that they have the support of most of the constituents, that's going to be my candidate. There are a couple of exceptions. I think if a hardline anti-choicer for me got the nomination, I would have a hard time voting for that person. Similarly, someone who was known to have consistently racist and misogynist and homophobic views. It's 9 in Seattle, so I'm like still drinking my coffee.
I do it all the time. You're good.
Then it becomes hard for me to vote for that person as well.
Right. Right. And then you, of course, have people who, might really hit you where it matters. You feel everything that you're saying, but there might be some fear that their views would be considered by the majority of the populace as too radical. And then there's the fear that putting too much support in them, at least if there's not ranked choice voting, could lead to someone that you really don't want being elected. To me, go ahead.
I
Go
mean,
ahead,
I
please
think
respond.
too, one thing that as a Democrat, like not even speaking as a progressive, but I do think it's important to try to support the nominee of the party whenever possible. And what happens all the time, and we just saw it in New York and we just saw it in Seattle, is when the moderate or more corporatist candidate wins, then it's like, oh, we got to rally behind him. We got to do everything we can. And then when the progressive candidate wins, people don't fall in line nearly as quickly. So I think it's important for us to demand that when the progressive candidate wins and create that expectation. And that means, sometimes we have to, eat shit, excuse me for cursing, and support the corporatists just in the case of like not getting a Republican in there.
Yeah, yeah, I get that. And I do see among politicians and everyday people that, they're more, centrist than leftist. As long as they're not on the right, I see them as well-intentioned and possibly just misinformed or a little afraid of what taking a risk might mean. To me, the real difference between the left and the right, no matter how extreme one's views are, is what drives us. For me, it's love for human beings, love for animals, love for the earth, and hate for injustice and inequality. I see the right as kind of being directed by the opposite. But on the other hand, there are people who work for Democrats who are more in the mainstream, election industry, if that's a thing, who consider all extremists the same, left or right. I'm curious what your take is on that, extremism in general. And is there a difference between someone on the far left and someone on the far right?
Absolutely. There is a huge asymmetry. And the minute you start talking about both sides, you lose me completely because you clearly do not understand the situation. Not just that the right has more extreme views, but, the extreme right, who have, spent the last 10, 15 years completely taking over the Republican Party, they also have been working on concentrating power. There's a lot of money behind them. So obviously their views are not symmetrical, but the amount of resources behind them and the amount of power that they hold within the political establishment of their party is absolutely not, it's asymmetrical. There's just no comparison.
Okay, that's good to know. Now, what about the media? As someone who is a journalist, as someone who has worked for the Associated Press, I will admit, even though AP, Reuters maybe strives for it, I don't even believe in objectivity. But there is a difference between editorializing and lying, sharing your opinion and spreading disinformation. Who is responsible for what we see and hear?
Yeah, I think the media stuff is particularly interesting because when you think about the concentration of power that's happening, not just with the election of President Trump, it's not enough for the folks who are in power to have economic control over our lives. They now want more control over what we read and see and hear. So you're seeing that with outlets like Bezos buying the Washington Post and obviously clearly taking a firmer editorial hand than he had initially. The New York Times, I mean, some of their coverage, the way they have covered power and concentration and politics is abysmal. You see Mark Zuckerberg doing a complete 180 on what kind of hate and harm policies Facebook is going to have. Elon Musk, of course, bought a social media platform outright. So I think it's really important to understand. I'm less concerned about left-right bias because, like you said, we all come in with our own biases, and more about who owns this platform, who decides who's getting hired, and who decides what's getting published and what's getting killed. And I think that's really a more effective way to look at our media diet at this point, which makes it hard, right? When I first started writing my newsletter in 2016, 2017, there were so many news sources. There were so many reporters covering, this emerging dystopia beat. There were times that it could have been all BuzzFeed News or all articles from Vice. BuzzFeed News is obviously gone. Vice is a shell of itself. It becomes harder as someone who covers this just because there's so much less journalism about it than there was 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's a really great point. It's becoming harder to be a journalist in every possible way to keep a job. You know, we just saw Teen Vogue collapse too.
Oh yeah.
You know, and then of course the dangers of being a journalist, literally speaking, the amount of journalists who are killed or injured on the job, you know, increases exponentially, it seems, every year. How does net
Yeah.
neutrality play into this? Without it, who will control the internet as you pointed out, as it, you know, filters into fewer and fewer companies? What about people like us who may have our own newsletter or our own podcast? What's the future going to look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think net neutrality is part of a much bigger shift. It almost feels quaint to talk about, considering the way that concentration of power has happened over the past couple of years. I mean, it's interesting because on the one hand, you see so many laid off journalists or journalists who've moved on to Substacks or to podcasts, and some are doing really well. But there's a limit to that, right? I mean, you mentioned in the beginning, I got into this through local political blogging, and there is a limit to what you can do as an individual. It is harder for groups to come together and form new publications and find funding for that. And it's harder to, start something like a podcast, because where are you going to find the capital? And then I think there's a limit to the audience an individual can have, particularly as more folks are individuals. And I think about, there are 5 or 6 journalists at BuzzFeed News that I used to read their work religiously. If they all had Substacks and I'm paying all $80 a year, that adds up really quickly. So there's also just a limit to scale of what the consumer can afford.
Yep, I was waiting for that part. And for what it's worth, my podcast costs nothing. It's the only reason I can do it. What can the average person then do to ensure they're getting whatever's closest to the truth? And what can we do to fight back to help protect ourselves and our neighbors?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is just being a skeptical consumer, particularly when you're seeing news on social media. Social media in particular, the headlines and the images and such, they are designed to give you an emotional reaction. As former digital strategist, I used to be on the other side of this, right? So if something gives you an emotional reaction, well, why do they want me having that reaction? What's the story behind it? Is there a less inflammatory source I can find? So often I'm just like, just Google it and see if there are other stories about it that come from an outlet you've heard of, and not even like a neutral outlet, right? And if it's Daily Kos or if it's the Bulwark, it's probably that means the story is real. So just doing some basic due diligence and having some skepticism, I think, is a big start.
Great advice. And on that note, how do online toxicity and hate filter into real life? What are we seeing beyond ICE and beyond people pretending to be ICE and empowering themselves that way, beyond just running over Heather hires with pickup trucks? How are the far right groups leveraging the disinformation in the media and their online networks through Telegram and other avenues to manipulate and grow on the ground?
Sure. As Americans, we live under the constant threat of political violence. That is, no matter who you are, no matter what you believe, if you fall out of favor, which, Marjorie Taylor Greene just discovered. Side note, I find it just darkly hilarious that for years she deals with left-wing harassment, and then 2 days of harassment from Trump's supporters, and she's like, "That's it, I'm done, I'm out, bye." But I think that says something both about the asymmetry, but also just about the threat, and that we're all vulnerable. And that starts to mess with your head. And I don't think we talk about that enough as a country and as a culture, how much we've normalized school shootings, how much we've normalized politicians making violent threats on a daily basis, how much we've normalized anonymous hate speech and harmful speech that becomes political violence. The goal of that is to drive us into silence. The goal of that is not just to drive us offline, but to drive us out of political and civic life. And so I always want to acknowledge that, because it's just, we don't talk about that as enough as just in our discourse, and also I think as activists and those of us who are trying to make change. And part of it is because sometimes if you think about it too much, you're like, oh man, I just need a break and I just need to watch Netflix for a while. But it's really important, I think, to understand the impact that has on us and on our politics. It's also why it's so important to find ways to speak out and to be brave, because people who see the constant onslaught, they also see the numbers at the No Kings protests. They see the news coverage that Tesla takedown gets. They see when Mamdani and Katie Wilson win elections. So, you know, they see that too, which is why I think it's so important when you can and as you are able, to find ways to show up and show your bravery as well.
That's excellent. Is there anything, although we're seeing some progress and, you know, we have moments of excitement, such as the recent electoral victories, but it feels, I hate to say it, but I'm scared. It feels like what's happening from the right, Project 2025, Trump and team, it's working. And it's working at the ground level too, with these, you know, far right groups gaining power and gaining access to inside areas of the government. What can we close on here for Democrats, for humanists, for leaders on the left? Is there anything we can learn from those on the right and apply it on the left to be more successful going forward to prevent future Trumps?
I mean, I think the most important thing to understand is that we really can't go back. We can only move forward. And that gives us an incredible opportunity to reimagine what we want our country to be and how we want to be governed. I think, you know, if we can learn anything from the right, it's when they get power, they do everything they can. They know it's for a limited time. They try to hold on to that power, but they also act like tomorrow it could be all taken away. We don't do that really well on the left. So that's definitely something we can take, you know, when we get power again, when we are able, hopefully at the next midterm elections or whatever places, we have to start leveraging that power as soon as we have it. I think we're seeing this with the blue states, where we're starting to see more fighting back, doing their own countermeasures and cooperation. I hope we see more of that next year. I hope that encourages states that are more purple to join and think about ways to leverage their power, or at least the levers of power they have available. We also just have to make sure that the next election is free and fair. One advantage of America is that our elections are locally run. So I have no doubt that the Trump administration is going to do everything they can to ensure that it's not free and fair, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be easy for them to do so. So I think that's also an important, you know, just understand what their goal and their agenda is, and make sure we're ready to counter it wherever we can, that we are using every lever of power that we have available to us.
Perfect. Thank you, Melissa. I was worried that I was going to leave this being even more scared, but I haven't, and I'm not.
People
This was
say that to me all the
insightful.
time.
Yeah. I mean, this was empowering. I think that people can get quite a bit out of this conversation, as well as going to your website to hire you. That's melissaryan.net. Of course, everyone needs to check out Control, Alt, Right, Delete. It's an incredible, frequent dose of everything you need, you know, kind of tied to what we've been talking about. So Melissa, thank you again for coming on. Listeners, if you've enjoyed this edition of Global Warming, be sure to like, comment, and share. Check out the first 5 episodes, subscribe, and become an official member. It's been an absolute pleasure, Melissa. I hope you stay in touch, and I hope you continue this incredible work.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. This episode has been sponsored by Zevo Life Superfood, Good Feels Cannabis Seltzer, Shimmerwood CBD-infused seltzers, exclusive discounts using code WARNING, link in the video description. Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving, even though that's a ridiculous holiday, as you all know. And we'll see you next week for episode 7.
War is immoral. Poverty is immoral. Racism is immoral. Police brutality is immoral. Oppression is immoral. Genocide is immoral. Imperialism is immoral. This country represents all those things. All those things. All those things.